stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. We now move to Part 3, debate on clauses 51 to 77 and Schedule 2. The question is at Part 3 stand part. The Honourable Rick Barker.
Mr Chairman, if I've got this part correct, I'm just flicking through it to make sure I'm correct. This is the part that enables the disclosure of the amount of money that is owed to the Crown by people who have fines outstanding. This is another part of this piece of legislation, which is to put pressure on fines defaulters to pay. When one examined the amount of what was happening in the outstanding fines, it became clear that there were a number of people who had significant assets who could pay their fines but refused to do so because there was no difficulties, there were no inherent problems with it. The amount of money that they owed the Crown was effectively secret. There was no knowledge of it. This was quite different from the debts that they would owe in the private sector. The person had outstanding student loans, had monies owed to the bank, had monies owed to a finance company, however any other debts they had in the private sector. All this information would be available to any potential creditor. But the amount of money that the person had outstanding to the state was not. Now, the unintended consequence for this was that people would pay off their private sector debts in preference to their debt to the Crown. Because once a person had paid down their private sector debts, it had a positive influence on their credit rating. And a person's credit rating could therefore be manipulated. Now, I felt, and others felt, that there was an imbalance here. That in conjunction with the parts that we've made, changes made before, to disclose the number of outstanding fines to finance companies, it was also a part of it was to disclose the outstanding balances that people had in fines in general. Now, when a person was then looking at their debt, if their amount of outstanding fines was disclosed as well as their other debts, then this would change a person's attitude towards paying off their court fines. It seemed in the current structure as it is that there's no pressure to pay fines because it doesn't affect one's credit rating. Pressure to pay off your credit card bill because it affects your credit rating. But there's no pressure to pay fines because it didn't affect anybody's credit worthiness. By disclosing this information, we are now having another pressure point on people with outstanding fines. Extra rules and improved rules for clamping vehicles, a driver stop licence order, demerit points for unpaid fines, and the other is about disclosure of the credit. This again shows that Parliament is serious about people who do not pay their fines. And I think the message must be very clear. The public has got the impression that the system somehow doesn't care about debt to the state. And all members of Parliament will have received letters, submissions from people say, what about this outstanding fines? What are you doing about it? How bad it is? And so on. And all of that is true. But the problem has been one of our own creation. We've created this, the Parliament has created this situation because the amount of fines that people have outstanding is effectively hidden, undisclosed, until it reaches the court and comes out in the public. So we need pressure on people to make them pay. And this is a third pressure point on people to make them pay. And I think it also goes back to the point that I made earlier about the person who wrote to me about his mother who got injured in a car accident because the system took no effective action against the driver with the outstanding fines. And I think this is a very good idea. A number of people have complained about it because they said there's privacy issues here. Privacy issues, that my debts to the court, my debts to the Crown should be private. Well, I say no. And I think this Parliament should also say no. I think this Parliament should also say no. That if a person racks up a substantial amount of debt and does nothing about it, does not enter into an arrangement to pay with the Ministry of Justice, takes no action, and believes that they can leave their fines and do nothing about them, and they can do so with impunity, well, then this piece of legislation says, think again. Because when these debts are disclosed,
Honourable Rick Barker.
When these debts are disclosed, then they can be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, and the individual goes to the bank to get a mortgage for the house, they'll suddenly find that they can't get the money. If they go to get a loan from any other facility, they'll suddenly find they can't get the money because of the debt they have to the Crown. And I think this is a very good thing. In the past, the debt to the Crown was undisclosed and they had no impact on their creditworthiness. Well, I believe that if your debt on a credit card can affect your creditworthiness or an individual's creditworthiness, then your debt to the Crown by way of fines should also have an equal impact on a person's creditworthiness. So this is the issue that's at stake here, and I see that the Minister has got an amendment on this bill here to change some of the requirements on it, and I'm looking at it. I think that we will support that. Can I report to the House, Mr Chairman, that the Select Committee had an extensive discussion with the Privacy Commissioner about these issues and about the means of it, and there were quite a number of concerns, but the Select Committee was at pains to address all of the issues of the Privacy Commissioner. Issues were also raised by the Regulations Review Committee, and they had quite a number of issues to raise with us, and with the assistance of the Ministry of Justice officials, we managed to resolve all of those issues as well. So whilst there were some privacy issues, in my opinion, the legislation, the amendments that have been made have addressed those, and we have now got in place a regime that if an individual thinks that their debts by way of traffic fines and speeding fines will go unnoticed, then the message from this Parliament is think again. Think again, because it's going to affect not only have an impact on your ability to carry a driver's licence, it's going to have an impact on your ability to get credit. And I think this is a very good thing. Let's those people who rack up these debts, extensive debts, and do little about them, that this Parliament cares about it. The state is going to use all of the tools it can to get its money, not because it wants to be owed this money. It's money that people have decided to incur because of the way they drive. But the Parliament is going to make sure that they are held to account in every means possible. And I think this is a very good message for this Parliament to send, particularly those people who, in the main, have the means to pay. They simply choose not to. As I spoke in the previous part, where someone had a clamp on their car, the cheque was found immediately. They didn't pay the fines because they didn't feel any pressure. Well, there's going to be pressure from now on. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
I'll call Lynn Pillay.